What should I be doing in number 4 as I look at that, Jared? I'm going to subtract those. So I should be looking at m to the third, right? So I'm going to have m to the third. Now when I get down to question number 5 and number 6, I have a couple of options. But when I look at number 5, I don't have as many options as I do that when I'm looking at 6 and 9. Those can be done many different ways, okay? So when I look at number 5, if I am subtracting my, as I look at that, as I subtract my x powers, as I am looking at that first one, what am I going to get, Amy, as I'm subtracting the x's in number 5? X to what power? So I have 6 and 2. 4. So I'm going to have x to the 4th if I'm looking at that. Grading, if I am looking at the y's and I had y to the 9 over y to the 5th, I'm going to end up with y to the 4th. Now, I don't need you to show me that subtraction. If you need to write it out, you might do that. But number 6, we need to decide which rule do we want to use. Do we want to take things to the power first? Do we want to simplify inside? So this morning I was working with someone, they simplified inside. Is that going to work? Definitely. Can I do the division and think of subtracting and say, oh, this is going to be x? If I am taking 1 as I look at that minus 3, that's going to be negative 2. And y to the 3 over 1 is going to be 3 minus 1, which is 2. And take all of that squared. Could I have done it that way? That's one way of doing it. Okay? I had someone else that said, you know what, I'm going to look at this problem and I'm going to take x to the 2nd, y to the 6th. I'm going to multiply these. Over here I'm going to have x to the 2 times 3, x to the 6th, and y to the 2nd. Could I have done it that way? Both ways are going to work. We now have to take these to the power. Well, if I'm doing this problem as I started it, as I start this, when I take power to a power as I am looking at those, then what am I looking at when I'm multiplying these two? I have x to what power? Okay, so I'm going to multiply negative 2 and 2, not add. So if I'm taking 2 times negative 2? Negative 4. And then, Carter, if I'm looking y to the 2nd raised to the 2nd, and again, I'm going to multiply my powers here, I'd have, when I multiply these two, 4, y to the 4th. So both cases, as I'm looking at this answer in number 6, I'm going to have y to the 4th. I can't have a negative exponent. So my negative exponent, I'm looking at my rule that tells me reciprocal, and I'm going to put that in my denominator of x to the 4th. Okay? Could I have the same thing here? Yes, because when I subtract here, I think you would have got this answer and then one step further. So it doesn't matter which way you do it. There's many options when you look at them. As we look, other questions you're like, not too sure about. Grading, which one? 8. Number 8, any other besides 8 as you are looking at yours that I could take a look at? Sure. The quiz. Power to a power, we're going to multiply. When the base is the same, we are adding. Negative exponents means tell us to do reciprocal, and then it becomes positive. And when we divide with the same base, we subtract it. Someone was asking if I'm going to leave the rules up when we take our quiz tomorrow. Yes, I will leave this up. Which one am I not putting up? Anything to the 0 equals? 1. Okay, so that one is not going to be up there, but I'll be up in here. So I'm taking a look at this first one. Because in the numerator, I have 6 to the 2nd times 6 to the 11th. That's going to give me 6 to what power when I add those exponents to the base? 6 to the 13th. Then I have in my denominator 6 to the 16th. So, Kale, as I look at that now, what am I doing with those exponents of 13 and 16? Because it's division, we're going to subtract it. So I'm going to take 13 minus 16, which gives us a negative 3. Now, I can't leave it as 6 to the negative 3 because I have a negative exponent. So as I'm looking at that, Ambry, I'm going to end up with 1 over 6 to the 3rd. And now you're going to use your calculator. And on your calculator, you're going to put in 6 to the 3rd power. So it's still 1 in the numerator as I look at number 7. But now when I put 6 to the 3rd, or if I don't know how to put 6 to the 3rd in my calculator, what am I going to put in? 6 times 6 times 6. I'm going to multiply 3 6s, which gives me 216. So these are the two solutions that I'm looking at in number 7 on your quiz, okay? All right, so let's take a look. So number 8 is somewhat similar to that, right? It's that we in the denominator have 2 x's. So in the numerator, I'm going to start this one off and I have x to the negative 8. And in my denominator, I have x to the negative 5 and x to the negative 4. So mark, because we're multiplying with the same base, what should I do with my exponents? Nope, careful, we're multiplying. We're going to do what with the negative 4 and negative 5? We're going to add those. So negative 4 plus negative 5 leaves me x to the negative 9. Now I have to do the subtraction. So Kaizen, as I'm doing the subtraction, I am really going to be taking negative 8 and minusing a negative 9. Now, this is where some of you use your calculators, right? If you don't remember that subtraction changes to adding the opposite, use your calculators, because Kaizen, I should be looking at x to what power for that one? How much? I just didn't hear you. X to the what power? So we have negative 8. This becomes minus a negative 9 becomes plus positive 9. So negative 8 plus 9. What did you end up with? X to the 1. But you subtracted 9. So you put negative 8 minus 9. It's minus a negative. So when you put this in your calculator and you're putting this in, this is negative 9 on the bottom. You're taking negative 8 minusing negative 9. That is not the same as subtracting 9 or adding a negative 9. So you need to be really careful how you write this. That's where the mistakes are going to happen on the quiz. Would be my guess. Okay? Use your calculator, right? So let's take a look at number 14. As I look at number 14, first off, as I look at 14, what do I know, Jaden, that 3 is to what power?
3 is the first power.
3 is to the first. And then x is to the negative 4, and I have 1. So if I'm looking at that, Brad, what needs to move? The 3 and the x? Just the 3, the 1, the x? Just the x. So when I start to write my answer, I know the 1 and 3 are staying where they are at. And what happens to the x then, Brad? And becomes x to the positive 4, right? As I'm looking at it, okay? Ivy, as we're looking at this next one, we have 7 to what power? 7 to the 1. And then I have x to the negative if we are looking at that 5, and y to the negative 1. So we can think of it as all over 1. So Kira, what is moving? Okay, so tell me how to write it in my answer. Is that your question? Okay. 7. X to the 5th minus 1st. Nice job. As you look at for what's on the quiz, we're on page 20. As you look at page 20, our quiz is going to be tomorrow, so 3-5. That is going to be Thursday of this week. 24 questions, 48 points. I can apply all my exponent rules. And we're going to look at the page before in our notes to look at what all those exponent rules are in just a minute. Key thing I will be looking at for this, no negative exponents anywhere when it's simplified. Cannot have a negative exponent. Remembering that negative exponent really telling us that we have to take the reciprocal. I cannot have, so no having something to the 0 power. If it's to the 0, you want to tell me that it equals 1, right? So if you leave it as 7 to the 0, I have to mark that wrong, because I agree, it might be that when you subtracted the things, you got 7 to the 0 or x to the 0. But if you leave it like this, just to the 0 power, I'm going to mark it wrong. I need to see that it is equal to 1. And the other thing that you are kind of taking a look at when you look at this quiz, when it says simplify, that means no parentheses in your answer. And that means you cannot have the same variable in the numerator and denominator. That's not simplified, right? So I can't have that same variable. I can't have something like x to the fourth divided by x to the negative 3. That's not simplified. I can also not have the same variable besides in the numerator and denominator. I cannot have that same variable be multiplied. Be multiplied. So I cannot have something like x to the fourth times x to the negative 3, because that is also not simplified. If I was looking at simplifying both of these, this first one would have been, someone said, oh, I moved the negative exponent up. Could you do that and go, oh, x to the fourth times x to the third, which gives us x to the 7? So, Brady, when you were asking about those ones, Brady, when you're asking about those ones with the negative exponent, you might want to just move your negative exponent up. Use that rule, that it's reciprocal. Now it's multiplication, it's easier. Whereas when it's multiplication, I might just add these two and say that this is x to the 1. So this would be my simplified answer, this would be my simplified answer. Cannot have them in both the numerator and denominator. So you have your quiz that I just handed back. So questions like the quiz you will see on the test. So this first two questions, this was the G5 quiz, so you had a score out of 4. Being 4, I could always do this. This makes pretty good sense. The answer to the first one was a to the 21. Most of you got that. There was not many of you that took 7 to the third power. There was a couple of you. Most of you multiplied the 7 and 3. This one, this answer isn't quite right. This should be a 5. And if I marked yours wrong, I'm sorry. So here's the deal on this one. You should have been looking at m to the third. This n goes down to the bottom, so it's going to be n to the second on the bottom, because that's what our rule says. We also had an n to the third here. And then this part becomes 6 to the second and m to the second. So when I look at the problem, they had 6 squared, that's my 36. M to the 3 over m to the second, that's our m to the first. And down here, this should have been n to the 5th. So if I marked yours wrong because you didn't have 5, just know that it's one of those ones that I don't put in for total points. It's like the one that doesn't count. But I do agree. I was marking it first, and then I was looking at it, and I'm like, that doesn't seem right. That should be n to the 5th. So when you take a look. This is kind of the review before the quiz. Kind of some basic vocabulary. Exponent of a base is the value that indicates the number of times. If you get stuck on the quiz and you have x to the 5th power, can you write it out as 5x's to help you see what it looks like? Yes. So keep it in mind you have a base and an exponent. Okay? When we talk about keeping our answer to a power, that means you write it with a base and an exponent. Okay? These are the ones you got to be really careful for, right? Parentheses or not having parentheses as you look at page 19, right before what we wrote down on the quiz. So as I look at that page, these two give me two different answers. This one is going to leave me with a positive 16. This one leaves me with a negative 16. They say those two are not equal, which is true. Okay? So being really careful as you look at those. The next thing is I have this YouTube video to look at that we're going to watch in just a minute, but anything to the 0 power, we're going to fill this in and then I'll let you comment this down as we're watching the video. Anything to the 0 power, if we are looking at it, is equal to, so if we are writing that down, what I want you to write is we are going to write x to the 0 equals 1. So going down through our symbols. What does that look like in words? We write it out, say any number, not 0, raised to the 0 equals 1. If I'm looking at that next one, negative exponent really tells us to find the reciprocal. Now I want you to notice that they just kind of write it with the 1 negative, okay? I also want you to think about it as if we have 1 over x to the negative m, that's going to be x to the m over 1. So our negative exponent just really tells us not negative numbers, it tells us reciprocal. And again, if the main thing you want to write down in that one is simply to make it positive, take the reciprocal. To make it positive, we're taking the reciprocal. If we think about our product rule, what I have up here, that second one down on the board, the product rule says, if we have the same base, we are adding our exponents. So when we multiply with the same base, we add our exponents. I don't know if you need to write the part in the plain English, but for some of you that makes more sense to write down add exponents. Multiply, same base, add exponents. The quotient, just the opposite, right? When we divide, we are going to be subtracting our exponents. If we are taking a look at power to a power, that's where we have it outside the parentheses. Remember, our goal when we simplify is always getting rid of those parentheses. So we are multiplying when we take a look at those ones. Raising a power to a power, you multiply. And here's where I'll have students make that kind of key error, is keep in mind, and I think that comes up in this product one that I'll show you in just a minute, when you have those numbers. So the product just means if I have two things in there, I have to take each one to the power. I know I'm going kind of fast, but I'll just leave this up here for you to copy. Take each thing to the factor. And this is the one that I like students to think of doing. You know, if you have 4 and x to the second raised to the third, this is where we are putting in that 4 to the 1. I'll tell you, my algebra kids are just still getting this wrong on their test, what you do next year at this time when you have to convert between radicals and exponential. This 4 to the 1 makes sure that I'm going to put 4 to the 3 and x to the 6. So I have to take each thing to the power when you are taking a look at that, okay? So once you have those rules written down for all of those, then we are taking a look at working on your assignment. So if you have these down so that they make sense for you, then I want you to turn to page 46. If you haven't finished 45, finish 45 first, then 46. Keep going on 47 and 48. Quiz is tomorrow.